I'm Joe Glenton. I'm a journalist and a former British soldier. Yeah, I think since I left the military and the more I've observed the relationship between the military and the royals, it is strange to see them cutting around in medals and in uniforms, which in many cases are unearned. Obviously, there are a couple of royals who did serve, even in wars, Harry being the obvious example. But it seems very strange to me. So what we're actually talking about here is what they call in the US, in reference to the US military, a kind of stolen valor. In this country, we have a slightly more obscure name for it. We call people who kind of try and cash in on military glory, which they aren't owed, which they haven't earned. We call them Walter Mitties. And there's a degree of that. And I think a lot of people wouldn't associate with that with the royals and their relationship to the military because it's just so normalized. But the more I've written about it, I wrote a whole chapter about it in my last book about this relationship. I increasingly see that that is kind of what it is. In most cases, there are a couple of royals, Harry being the obvious example who actually served in a war. Andrew's another one, so he's not obviously not doing a lot of public facing stuff at the moment. But it is a kind of military cosplay. And in many cases, people wear the uniforms of regiments that they've never served in, they're not associated with. They're just handed these roles of colonel in chief of such and such a regiment. I can remember in my case, it was the Princess Royal who came and gave our medals after Afghanistan. And she was colonel in chief of the Royal Logistics Corps, of which I was a part. But I think the closer you look at it and the more reasoned you try and be about this relationship and the wearing of uniforms, which in many cases, many veterans would stress, people have died. They've died for the uniform. They've died to wear the colours of this regiment, to wear its beret and to wear its trappings. And it certainly more and more strikes me as a sort of LARPing, that the rules are kind of LARPing around in military uniform. And fundamentally, what underpins it, it's kind of reasserting this relationship between the military and the royals, so that the military, which is generally, when you look at opinion polls, it's generally quite well thought of in this country, so that they can kind of cash in on some of that wholesome military stuff. And it's kind of, it's a central part of the brand, of kind of brand Windsor, or whatever you want to term it. It's an interesting question in terms of how many people in the military who have been through the military experience become Republicans or become anti-monarchists. I think it is more than you suspect. I certainly know a lot. I mean, one thing the military experience can do, strangely for many people, is it kind of instills a sort of suspicion of the state, which can go all kinds of ways in ex-military people. But a lot of people do question it, that I know, and some of the firmest and the most strident Republicans I know served in the military, and I think that was a central part, that experience of some proximity to the British state and to the royals actually kind of accelerated that process. Of course, there are many people who are pro-royal or who may become pro-royal from their experience in the military. It can totally go the other way, as you can probably understand. But I think it's there are more people than you would imagine who, through that experience, start to question aspects of the British government, the British state, and by extension, the monarchy as well. So it's more common than people might think. Trooping the colour is an interesting example. I think the present moment is interesting because it feels like over the last 10 years or so, there's been lots of royal stuff. And partially that's because there have been marriages, there have been deaths of senior figures in the royal family. But we have to remember that stuff of that nature is always going on. It's part of the annual schedule, and they love the royals and the military to some degree, and the government, of course, love the pageantry. It's kind of a grand British tradition, and what it does is it reasserts this connection, and it recalibrates this connection on a rolling basis between the military and the royals, and it has done for hundreds of years. So it really kind of embeds and normalizes the idea of the monarchy. It makes these things, which, if you look at it with a reasoned mind, a critical mind, in my opinion, are absolutely bizarre and actually quite negative for the country. It makes them appear normal. And annually, even outside the more recent outbursts around the death of the Queen and the various marriages and other big events, it kind of constantly drip, drip, drip reaffirms that relationship between the military and the royals. Well, I think one of the key drivers of it is just the normalization, the constant normalization of this institution, and that the relationship between the royals and the military is part of that. It's interesting to me. I suppose the most recent example of a member of the royal family who served in Afghanistan was Prince Harry. Obviously, he was there not long after I was there. And he's spoken about his mental health stuff, and I'm sure that's very true. And I'm sure it's the case for other people in his rank in terms of the military, junior officers, which is what it was that he reached the rank of captain. But there's almost a sense, and it's a mistake to kind of be like Harry's just one of the lads. He's kind of an everyman soldier, and because your average veteran who didn't go to a posh school, wasn't born into the royal family, does not have access, cannot have the same material access to the kind of services, healthcare, and so on that the royal family have. It's absolutely not the case that someone who was recruited in a council estate in Manchester or Glasgow or London has the same privileges. So there is a world of difference. And I always try and encourage people to not conflate the two. The officer class and Harry, for example, have a very different lived experience of what it's like to be in the military, of course, but also what it's like when they come out, the things they have to deal with. Harry's never going to be without a job, for example. He's not gonna struggle to get healthcare in this country where we've seen the NHS and so on cut back. We've seen benefits cut and stuff like that. We've seen that maybe some improvements in mental health provision specifically for veterans, but a lot of it's still charity based. So I think it's precarious to try and compare the two. And the experience of your average working class veteran who served in the ranks, who wasn't a commissioned officer, didn't go to Standard, is very, very different from that of officers generally, but particularly royals who served in the military, of which Harry is the signal example at the moment. I think a lot of progressive-minded people, people who kind of try and exercise their democratic impulse in this country, I think sometimes they slightly overlook the monarchy, and that's partly because, as we've been saying, it's normalized, and it appears untouchable and eternal. But I think I would argue, having observed how the monarchy works in relationship to the British state, in relation to the military over many years, I don't think there is a single question in the British context which doesn't run into the monarchy at some point, whether it's inequality, whether it's common ownership of land, public ownership of land, whether it's defense stuff, whether it's the arms trade, whatever it is, all of those things, environmental issues and so on, all of those things eventually run smack bang into the question of the monarchy. And that, for me, is enough of a rationale to, at the very least, be critical of this institution. I would go further and say we need to get rid of it and become a grown-up, proper, normal country to some degree.